Rupert Neve. Rupert Neve is possibly the godfather, the grandfather of studio consoles. So very much a name that many people will know if they work in the pro audio sector. However, in 2016, Rupert Neve and his company made a bid for home listeners with this headphone amplifier. It's simply called the Rupert Neve headphone amplifier. And this is what it looked like back then. However, it doesn't look like this anymore because last year, Rupert Neve, the company, effectively reskinned this amplifier and gave it a new look, and also introduced two new products, a phono stage, and then this guy here, which is called the Fidelice, I don't know how you say this, but Fidelice, well, let's say Fidelice. Fidelice Precision DAC and headphone amplifier. So this is more of a statement. Sorry, it's a courier. Wow, it's a pain in the ass to get this out. Finally. So this was the interruption. I think it might be Thomas Dolby. Maybe. It is. This is what interrupted our video. 12-inch of Thomas Dolby and Ryuichi Sakamoto. Yeah, this is a relatively obscure 12-inch single from the 80s. Probably one of Thomas Dolby's best songs, but never really featured on an album. Anyway, yeah, go check it out. I don't think it's on streaming services. Or maybe the live version is. Anyway, we should resume. Rupert Neve, right? Rupert Neve. So where was I? Fidelice, Precision DAC and headphone amplifier. Look at the new styling. It's very mid-century modern. You can see the same new styling on the phono stage down here. I'm not talking about this phono stage today. We're just going to concentrate on this DAC and headphone amplifier. So getting straight into it, we've got a switchable line out here. This is for the back panel, whether you want to use headphones or not, or whether you want to use this as a preamp, because this is also a preamp. We'll come back to that later. Switchable gain, and then we've got, I guess people call this a 1/4 inch. I call it a 6.4mm headphone socket. Balanced XLR. However, very unusual, the Pentacon socket from Sony, also balanced, but good to see that here. Good to see a different sort of standard on the balanced end of things. Then we've got the source selector switches here for analog inputs, balanced and unbalanced, and then coax, optical, and USB for accessing the internal AKM DAC. And then we have sample rate indicators here, so whatever sample rate is coming into the DAC gets shown here. And then lastly, a very Rupert Neve-esque volume control. And I love the red. I think the red is just what makes it, and I think that's what, you know, I guess it's iconic really for Rupert Neve. And then on the top we have this, I mean, it's a really nice looking piece. And one of the reasons I was drawn to reviewing this box was because of the way it looks. However, as Steve Guttenberg pointed out in his review, but didn't show this, that rings. That's probably not ideal. A lot of companies go to great lengths to dampen their chassis. And then there's this nice wooden inset here. However, mine at the back, the glue hasn't sealed it properly and it keeps popping up every so often. So I don't know whether that's going to affect full production units, because there's a sticker on the bottom of this unit that says it's a prototype. So it could be just, you know, a prototype niggle. I don't know. So let's do the back panel. We've got outputs here. So these are for the preamp or standalone DAC status, which can be switched between fixed and variable outputs here. So balanced, single-ended. Then we've got analog inputs. This is a preamplifier, balanced, single-ended here. These are the inputs that I use the most, specifically coaxial. I fed this using a ALLO DIGIONE Raspberry Pi based streamer. Didn't use the Toslink very much. USB I used for my TV home theater type setup. Here we have the filter options for the internal AKM DAC. Now, they don't really make much of a difference. It's super subtle. Some DACs, they make a big difference. On this one, not so much. But I did have a preference for the filter called high quality sound. But again, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over this. And then obviously IEC socket. And I think a high-end DAC / headphone amplifier like this needs high-end headphones to go with it. So for my listening, I use two different models, the Meze Empyrean, which I have reviewed before, and then also the FIDELICE D8000, which I will be reviewing in the future. Now, I've had this precision DAC since just before Christmas, and now is the middle of February. So I've been listening to this for many, many, many weeks. And to try and isolate its performance, I've been comparing it to the Mytek Brooklyn Plus, not the bridge. I almost said the bridge there, but it's not the bridge. It's just the DAC with the headphone amplifier in it that sells for $2,000. Now this sells for $5,000. So we have to be careful that we don't just get carried away because we've got a more expensive unit, which is why I listened to this for so long. And I did manage to pretty confidently pick out the differences between the two units. And really, for the sake of argument, if you want to know some of the albums that allowed me to discern those differences, they were Peter Gabriel's debut album, LCD Sound System's Sound of Silver, Smog's Red Apple Falls, and what was the other one? I've forgotten it already, damn. Oh yeah, David Bowie's Earthling. So those four albums really, which are kind of a very broad-ish range of music. For people that get hung up on acoustic music, the Smog album is the one that you should listen to there. Yeah. Now the DAC section inside this Rupert Neve FIDELICE unit goes all the way up to 384 kilohertz compatibility with PCM. I don't have any music that's 384 kilohertz. Most of the music that I listen to is Red Book CD quality 44.1. Of the list of the four albums that I just mentioned, only the Peter Gabriel do I have in, I think it's 24.192. That's it. I'm not a high-res nut. I'm probably never going to be because the music isn't there yet. Now, comparing the Rupert Neve versus the Mytek on functionality, the biggest difference is there's no remote control for the Rupert Neve, whereas with the Mytek we can use an Apple remote. The Mytek also has a phono stage, and with Rupert Neve we have to buy a separate phono stage, which sells for north of $1,000, I believe. The Mytek does do balance, but you have to use twin 6.4mm sockets for that, so you need an adapter, whereas we don't need that adapter with the Rupert Neve. It's all there, including the Pentacon, as I mentioned before. So really, if I had to pick one on functionality, I would go with the Mytek every time because it's more of a Swiss Army knife type product. The Rupert Neve, kind of less so, but we'll get to that. But in terms of audible differences, to me, there is no question that the Rupert Neve is the better sounding piece. Now, almost all of my listening was done via single-ended connections on these two headphones, the Final and the Meze. And what I found, first of all, was that In the mid-range between the Mytek and the Rupert Neve, we get comparable levels of detail retrieval. But I would say the Rupert Neve gives us more head stage depth, and that means we also get a better sense of layering front to back. And it's also wider. It's quite a bit wider actually. And the Rupert Neve DAC also gives us more obvious textural information when it comes to the surface of the sort of big fat bass notes that populate Orbital's chime. I've been listening to loads of Orbital recently, I don't know why, but especially the first album, and with those bass notes and the sort of 303 squiggly sounds that come through, they have more texture through the Rupert Neve than they do through the Mytek. And that might be because the Rupert Neve has slightly less treble glare than does the Mytek. So you should know that the way I had this set up was the ALLO DIGIONE streamer DAC has two digital outputs that run concurrently. So I could have that feed going to two different DACs, which is how I did my listening. So overall, I would say the Rupert Neve DAC headphone amplifier sounds bigger and less uptight than the Mytek. The Mytek is a bit more constrained like that. So we might think of the Rupert Neve as more of a grown-up Brooklyn Plus. Now, the smart people among you will think, well, okay, isn't the grown-up Brooklyn Plus a Manhattan? Well, yeah, it is. But I don't have a Manhattan here to make that comparison. I have to deal with the cards that are dealt me. Maybe I'll get a Manhattan down the line, who knows? But probably by that time, the Rupert Neve will be back with its maker. And then I thought, well, maybe I can somehow add to the Mytek to bring it up closer to the level of the Rupert Neve. And my first port of call was to use the Meze with their balance cable and the twin pronged adapter made for me by Cameron Pope at Krispy-Audio in Australia. Shout out to Cameron, top guy. And I listened to that for a couple of days. And yes, it's better than the single-ended output, and it might be the cable material as well, cable makeup. Definitely better than running the Mytek single-ended. Bit more separation, a little bit more in the low end, bit cleaner, but still not close to the Rupert Neve running single-ended, the big Rupert Neve that is. And then I thought, right, let's go back to single-ended. Let's add the smaller Rupert Neve headphone amplifier that I showed you at the start of the video. So I went balanced out of the Mytek into the back of that headphone amplifier to see how close its single-ended output with the Mytek playing DAC would get to the bigger FIDELICE Rupert Neve box. And this is what I found. Okay, hands up if you think I'm going to say that the Mytek with the smaller Rupert Neve headphone amplifier sounds as good as the bigger Rupert Neve DAC headphone amplifier. No, it doesn't. Yes, the little headphone amplifier makes the Mytek sound a bit better, behind headphones that is. It's a bit richer, it's a bit warmer. I enjoy that. But the big FIDELICE still gives us a wider soundstage, a weightier push to sound, and gives us better focus, better image focus like a camera, a better sense of separation. These are small differences, yes, but that's what the audiophile world is all about. Tiny differences, tiny improvements. Well, for some people it's all about that. In this particular situation, we are talking about small deltas, yes. But not are we paying for a better sound, from this box, because it does sound better than these two put together. but we're also paying for better looks. In my opinion, I think this is light years ahead of this, and I think this is the ideal candidate for just sitting alone on my low board here behind me. Many of you ask me where I get this low board. I don't know. I've actually forgotten from where I bought it. I think it was Maisons du Monde, which is a website that only operates in Europe, I believe. So, sorry, don't know. Anyway, this sort of really fits with the mid-century modern vibe of many people's modern lives. Great fit for that. Tremendous looking. This less so. This is a bit more of a, I don't know, a nerdier setup. But it's also more affordable as well, so you kind of get what you pay for. So I'm using these Klipsch speakers right now behind me. They are the Forte 3. I think they're wonderful. I've reviewed them before. And powering them, I have a pair of Schiit Aegir monoblocks. Those will be reviewed in the future, I believe. Now, some people like to think that going DAC direct into monoblocks, the shortest distance between 2 points in an analog circuit, gives us the best sound. So when I run the Mytek direct into the Schiit monoblocks, I get what I think is a pretty terrific sound, and I use the volume control on the Mytek DAC to attenuate what I get through the speakers, right? So it's a very simple setup, it's DAC direct. And you'd think that going DAC direct would be the best result, the best audible result. But over the years, and it's no difference here, if I put a preamp between the DAC, between this Mytek DAC, and these Schiit monoblocks, I get a fuller, richer, punchier sound. It's not quite as fast, so you trade some speed, it's not so quicksilvery, but it just sounds just fuller and more enjoyable. In this particular case, my preamp is the Freya. Now, I've been very careful here not to engage the tube mode, so I'm just using it as a normal solid state preamp in its solid state mode, and I get a better sound by putting something extra into the chain. And that confounds me. I think it confounds a lot of people, but I found something interesting about the Rupert Neve working as a preamp. Because remember, from the start of this video, we saw the analog inputs, we saw the analog selector switch, we saw the analog outputs. So what I did, I moved the balanced outputs from the back of the Mytek into the back of the FIDELICE Rupert Neve unit. So again, I went DAC direct. And I don't know whether it's because the balanced analog outputs on the Rupert Neve are transformer coupled. That's something that apparently they do on all of their balanced outputs. I don't know whether it's because of that or not, but I don't get that, don't suffer that compromise of not having a preamp, a traditional Schiit preamp in the chain. I'm much happier going DAC direct from the Rupert Neve than I am the Mytek, so much so that I actually don't need the Freya preamp in the chain. So that's quite a convoluted story, isn't it? But what I'm saying is that if we're comparing going DAC direct between the Rupert Neve and the Mytek, the Rupert Neve sounds more energized, it has more punch, more attack, more excitement really, it just makes music sound more alive. But it also has, and this is quite important, a more honeyed top end. So if you didn't follow all of that, all I'm trying to say is that with the Mytek, I prefer a preamp in the chain between it and the power amps. And yet with the Rupert Neve, the big one, I don't feel that I need the extra preamp in the chain. I'm happy to go DAC direct from it into the power amps because the Rupert Neve is also a preamp. And this is a clear distinction that needs to be made here, really, I think. I see the Mytek and DACs like it as DACs with volume controls. Whereas I see the Rupert Neve, even though it's called the Precision DAC, I see that as a preamp with line level inputs with a DAC inside. So it's not a DAC with a volume control, it's a preamp with a DAC. Man, this shit gets confusing, doesn't it? It really does. Anyway, so with this Rupert Neve box, you're paying for simplicity, you're paying for good looks, you're paying for better sound than more affordable gear, so you get what you pay for. I'm not yet convinced about the value quotient that it offers. $5,000 is a lot of money, even for a product like this. It doesn't have a remote control. Now, I know purists will say, well, it doesn't need one. That's the best way to have a volume control implemented without the volume being remotely controlled. But it's still kind of annoying if you're using it as a pre into a pair of monoblocks into speakers. So yeah, I guess I have kind of mixed feelings about this product. It sounds very, very, very good, but it's also very, very expensive. However, I will add this though, and this is a bit of a spicy finding. I prefer the punch and the drive of the headphone output of the Rupert Neve to the headphone output found on the Cord Dave. It just has greater dynamics really. And I find that the Dave's headphone output, sometimes a little bit weak source, sometimes. And I found that out by just routing the Dave into the Rupert Neve's analog inputs. So yeah, if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up somewhere down here. If you like my attitude towards expensive high-end audio products like this, then please subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching.